Is going to be recorded. So if you're joining us online and you don't want to be seen, please just close out your video. And if you're in person and you don't want to be seen, just stay away from this side of the room and you should be fine. Great. Okay, I think we'll get started. People are probably going to be shuffling in and out, both in the Zoom room and in the live room. So again, bear with us. So welcome everyone to the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear Wars official side event to the long delayed 10th Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, N-5 Doctors Speak with One Voice. My name is Molly McGinty. I'm the Associate Program Director with IPPNW, and I'm moderating today's discussion. Before we begin, I want to note a few housekeeping items, which I've already kind of covered, that this is both a hybrid event. So we'll have both speakers in person and online. Please bear with us as we navigate the tech. I think so far it's gone well. I don't want to jinx it, but we should be fine. So if you're joining us online, welcome. Please do stay muted throughout the remainder of the event. We'll hopefully have time for the Q&A immediately afterwards where you can unmute, share some thoughts, share some questions, and we'll try to balance questions both in the Zoom room and in person. And if you're here in person, since we are a Federation of Health Professionals, if you wouldn't mind putting on your mask so we can all continue to stay healthy and keep one another safe, I think that would be wonderful, unless you're actively talking, eating, or drinking. Great. So we're gathered here today between the solemn 77th anniversaries of the atomic bombings of the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tens of thousands of people died in both cities within minutes of the blast and subsequent 5 months following the attacks due to complications related to radiation exposure, lack of adequate healthcare, and other complications. In Nagasaki alone, nearly 74,000 people were immediately killed, with another 75,000 injured. In Hiroshima, 90% of doctors and nurses were killed or injured, and 42 out of 45 hospitals became non-functional. The few physicians who survived and were physically able to assist the injured had to work without equipment, medicine, and other resources needed for effective treatment. There was no electric power, no water, no transportation system, no communication, and unrecognizable surroundings. So it goes without saying that health professionals were not able to provide meaningful medical support to those who needed it most. Today, there are approximately 13,000 nuclear weapons in the world, all of which are more powerful than the bombs that caused unparalleled humanitarian damage in 1945. Studies show that even a so-called limited nuclear war between any of the 9 nuclear armed states would not only harm those in the targeted cities, but would severely disrupt the global climate and agriculture for decades following, leading to up to 2 billion people at risk of starvation. A subsequent study is coming out next week that shows the impact of the limited nuclear war would be worse than previously predicted. This is not the future that needs to be. I recall the statement given by P5 leaders on the 2nd of January of this year, reaffirming that a nuclear war can never be won and must never be fought. And we call on our leaders to make tangible plans this month in the UN in fulfilling their nuclear disarmament responsibilities according to Article 6 of the NPT. Today, as we gather, we remember those who suffered the almost incomprehensible humanitarian catastrophe 77 years ago, and we can recommit ourselves to see a world free from nuclear weapons. Today, we're deeply concerned about the recent news regarding the potential danger of nuclear disaster connected to the military activities around the Zaporizhzhia, I'm sorry if I did not say that right, nuclear power plant. We call on all sides to cease those activities surrounding the nuclear power plant, and as states here at the NPT Review Conference to add their voices to this call. This is a unique chance for countries to speak with one voice against military endangerment of nuclear reactors and to pass a resolution declaring that such endangerment should be prohibited. So today, at the suggestion of the Undersecretary General of Disarmament Affairs, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, we are gathered by health professionals from the N-5 to speak with one health voice on the urgent need to eliminate the threats posed by nuclear weapons and the medical imperative to prevent nuclear war. We will hear about the history of health professionals' involvement in disarmament and the opinions behind IPPNW's core message to pursue a more peaceful and secure world free from the threat of nuclear annihilation. As you can imagine, there are a number of barriers in getting health professionals from China, France, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Russia in one room. Between patient care, COVID and climate concerns, and your summer holidays, our French and American colleagues will be joining us live online, Ella and Joe. Our Scottish and Russian colleagues will present via pre-recorded videos. And we do regret to inform you that we will not be joined by any of our Chinese colleagues today, but we in IPPNW will resume dialogue with IPPNW China and anticipate they will join future meetings. So please do stay tuned for that. In addition to our 4 IPPNW representatives, I'm honored that we get to share the floor today with Veronique Ristori of the International Red Crescent and Red Cross. Following the remarks from our 5 representatives, you will stay tuned for that. If you're joining us online, put questions in the chat throughout or save them to the end and say them live. So without further ado, I want to pass the floor to my friend and colleague, Dr. Ella Fayez. Dr. Ella Fayez is a young doctor from France. She's now living in Sweden to pursue her residency as an emergency room doctor. She has been part of IPPNW since 2015, and she is the immediate past student representative of IPPNW and an active member of IPPNW France. Ella, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone from the internet and the real world. My name is Ella Fayez, and I'm an emergency room resident and member of IPPNW France, and the immediate past IPPNW European student representative. I'm really glad to be talking here today, but also sad and concerned because, as a number of my colleagues, we feel the urge to speak up in the name of the new generation. We also speak up in the name of our grandparents who have lived under the war, in the name of our colleagues who have fled from wars all around the world. And today we need to be more united than ever to create a safe, healthy future. I can't stress enough the importance of spreading the word on the urgent need to create a world free from nuclear weapons. Let's take a concrete example as to why this is so important to me, to us, as a health professional. A recent study made by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, titled "No Place to Hide," explored what would happen if a single nuclear weapon were to detonate over 9 major international cities in the world. As a proud French citizen, I want to expand on the consequences of 100-kiloton nuclear bomb over the Eiffel Tower. Let's imagine it's a Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock. Tourist families are enjoying the sun, the Eiffel Tower, and then boom, we have the detonation. We have a fireball who would spread about 300 meters in every direction, and everyone, with no exception within this radius, would die instantly. To a distance a little over 1 kilometer from the detonation point, the explosion would generate a fatal dose of ionizing radiation. Within 3 kilometers, there will be blast damage, local fires. 3 hospitals would probably collapse or get caught in fire. Of course, and sadly, doctors are not immortals. And even if we can go through 36 hours without sleep, all of us and all of my colleagues would be dead or severely injured. We love our job and our patients, but there is nothing we can do. We are now at 4 kilometers. Everyone would get 3rd-degree burns on all exposed skin. Again, we have 4 more hospitals down. Last but not least, around a full 9 kilometers from the center of the blast, glass windows would explode and cause additional injuries. So now we have 7 hospitals down and over 1 million injured people. If we do a rough calculation, it would mean for us that 18 times more people would need medical attention than at the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic in all of France. And once again, this is a dead end. We do not have the human or financial or material resources to take care of so many patients. France possesses about 290 nuclear warheads, but its healthcare infrastructure is not prepared if 1 nuclear weapon was used on her soil. As an ER doctor, I have seen firsthand the devastating impacts of COVID-19 on our healthcare system, and this would be nothing compared to the consequences of one single nuclear detonation over our beloved city of Paris. I'm sorry if my presentation sounded apocalyptic, but we need to speak as a healthcare, as a person. We need to speak and spread the reality of what nuclear weapons represent. We must prevent what we cannot cure, as there can be no meaningful medical response to any use of nuclear weapons. We must eliminate the threat and abolish nuclear weapons. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you for that very, very moving and, like you said, terrifying presentation. Let's see, great. So now, just to keep to time, we are going to move directly to Dr. Leslie Morrison, who again could not join us in person. Let's see. Dr. Leslie Morrison is a retired family doctor and coordinator of MedAct Scotland, the Scottish affiliate of IPPNW. She's going to give about a 5-minute pre-recorded presentation, which we'll share now. Hopefully the sound works.
My name is Dr. Leslie Morrison. I'm the coordinator of MedAct Scotland. I'm a retired GP, family doctor, and worked for several years in public health. I live just south of Edinburgh in the Scottish borders. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. MedAct, the UK affiliate of IPPNW, is an organisation of health professionals working to make the world a better, fairer, safer place. It was formed in 1980 by the amalgamation of the Medical Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons and the Medical Association for the Prevention of War. And its mission is to support health professionals from all disciplines to work together towards a world in which everybody can truly achieve and exercise their human right to health. We work to make the connections between disarmament, social justice, health justice, and climate change. Scotland is a devolved nation within the UK, with legislative power for some issues and not others, including defence. Polls have shown that the majority of Scottish people reject the idea of having nuclear weapons in our country. And the Scottish Government, a coalition of the Scottish National Party and the Green Party, want the country and the world to be rid of them. Yet, because the Westminster UK Government's policy is to retain them, we are in the unique position of hosting nuclear weapons against our will. Trident sits in the River Clyde, 30 miles from our largest city, Glasgow. And despite the best efforts of CND, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, MedAct, and many other organisations, features infrequently in public and Westminster debate. Debates to address the new leadership of the Tory party, and thus the new Prime Minister, have failed to even mention it, although the onset of war in Ukraine brought the existential threat posed by nuclear weapons more into the public consciousness. The government, however, has failed to renounce the use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. We have been campaigning hard for the UK government to sign up to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and for it to uphold its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Despite being signatories to this treaty, their current intention is to greatly increase the number of weapons in their nuclear arsenal, and they have violated the spirit of the NPT by providing the HEU-fueled nuclear submarines to Australia under AUKUS. Their rationale for failing to sign up to the TPNW appears to be that current signatories are non-nuclear states, and that this therefore precludes them from signing. They dismiss the idea that signing would provide an opportunity to lead the world in disarmament. A strong plank in the argument for Scottish independence is that a Scottish government would remove Trident from our shores, sign up to the TPNW, and work to promote the NPT. This could provide a very positive role model for small countries throughout the world to follow suit, and could strengthen international calls for nuclear disarmament. Many in the Scottish disarmament community, however, it has to be said, are not in favour of independence and believe that, as citizens of the UK, our immediate aim should be to rid the whole of the UK and not just Scotland of nuclear weapons. The independence debate, and it seems that the referendum will be held in October of next year, 2023, offers an opportunity to bring the nuclear debate into focus, and this is exactly what we aim to do. As health professionals, we have a special and powerful voice in the debate, and we'll be emphasising our solidarity with IPPNW colleagues in the N-5 countries to take their NPT Article 6 responsibilities seriously. In line with this, we welcomed the IPPNW call from 17 Nobel laureates and the EVAS petition signed by over 1 million people for a pledge of no use of nuclear weapons by Russia and NATO countries, including the UK. There would be no effective medical response to the consequences of nuclear war. It must be avoided at all costs, and it is our professional responsibility as health professionals to share that message with people and governments. Thank you.
Thank you. How amazing is it to hear from both an ER doctor and a family practitioner who understand the urgent need to ban and eliminate nuclear weapons from a health perspective, and these different backgrounds that they have that both add to the urgency. So next we are going to hear from Dr. Joe Hodgkin. Dr. Joe Hodgkin is a hospitalist physician at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. He's an instructor at Harvard Medical School, a board member of Greater Boston PSR, and a member of IPPNW. In his clinical work, he takes care of a wide range of patients admitted to the General Internal Medical Service and teaches medical students and residents. His advocacy is focused on medical education on nuclear weapons, lobbying government representatives for de-escalatory nuclear policy and disarmament, and medical diplomacy with international colleagues. Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank High Representative Nakamitsu and Molly for arranging this event, and Drs. Faiz, Mironova, Morrison, and Ms. Christori for taking part. I also want to recognize the victims and survivors of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as the 77th anniversary of those bombings are 2 days ago and tomorrow, respectively. What brings us together this week is the 1968 Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. This treaty should have been sufficient to solve the existential threat that these weapons pose to life on Earth. The deal at its core was an agreement that non-nuclear states would not develop nuclear weapons in exchange for the guarantee in Article 6 that the nuclear weapon states would pursue, quote, general and complete disarmament under strict and effective international control, end quote. On the non-proliferation front, the treaty has failed 4 times, most recently in 2006. Some analysts see a silver lining that there hasn't been more proliferation than that, and that 4 former nuclear weapon states disarmed under the treaty's provisions. In terms of disarmament, the record is also mixed. Total nuclear weapon stocks around the world are at about 1/5 of their peak in the 1980s because of successful disarmament efforts. But our countries, the nuclear-armed countries, are developing more advanced capabilities, allowing arms control treaties to expire, and since February of this year have exchanged dangerous threats of the use of nuclear weapons. The P5 nations continue to reiterate that they are pursuing complete disarmament and that, quote, a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought, end quote. But this is hypocrisy in light of the actions of our governments. A similar hypocrisy underlies the enforcement of this treaty, where our nations browbeat the 180-odd non-nuclear armed states about non-proliferation, but refuse to live up to their Article 6 obligations. I recognize that the appalling war in Ukraine and tensions over Taiwan make multilateral action more difficult. But our organization, International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, has not lost sight of the big picture. As the others have outlined today, these weapons would threaten life on Earth if used. There is significant risk of intentional or even accidental use. Climate models show that even a so-called limited nuclear war with an exchange of about 100 weapons of kiloton yield would disrupt global temperatures and precipitation enough to put billions at risk of starvation. A wider exchange could make the planet uninhabitable. This danger, like the threat of pandemics and climate change, is indifferent to national identities and borders. I'm a hospitalist physician at Massachusetts General in Boston. I take care of patients on our inpatient general medicine floors. And as a member of this network, I also join these wonderful colleagues in educating the public and the medical community about this critical issue, lobbying for a sane nuclear weapons policy in my own country, and building diplomatic dialogue with my international colleagues where our governments have failed. This review conference is not a time for complacency about the partial successes of the NPT. This existential threat is as acute as ever. I agree with Dr. Ira Helfand that the P5 nations should not leave this conference without unequivocally committing not to use nuclear weapons in the current conflict. Then they should recommit to their Article 6 obligations by signing the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The time for action is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I want to thank Joe, Ella, and Dr. Morrison for joining us today and centering this conversation around the humanitarian impacts and not only telling us what the potential consequences are, but what we can do about them. Dr. Morrison noted very strongly about the need for the P5 to adhere to their obligations under Article 6 and to sign and ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons as soon as possible. We just heard Dr. Joe Hodgkin reiterate a call that IPPNW gave on Friday during the NGO statements for the P5 to not leave this month's conference without following through with those obligations as well and having an action plan ready. So next we are going to hear from Dr. Olga Mironova from IPPNW Russia. She has been a very key leader. Sorry, let me figure this out very quickly. In our
My name is Dr. Leslie Morrison.
There we go. We needed one single tech problem before the day was over. So, okay, great. Now let's hear from Dr. Olga Mironova. Before we start, I will note that this sound is very, very low on my end. So if you're joining us virtually, please do maybe turn up your sound, and we're going to do the same on this side, and I hope it will work just fine.
Dear attendees of the conference, I would like to send you this video message from the room where for many decades, one of the founders of the IPPNW, Eugene Chazov, was writing his talks, books, and scientific articles. I believe that the core principles of the movement need to be highlighted today, and one of them is the close connection between the physicians around the world who are calling for the prevention of nuclear war. We might have different opinions on so many problems and questions, but the values for the doctors have remained the same over the centuries. And the most precious treasure for any physician is the human health. Everyone knows that it's always better to prevent a disease than to treat it. So in order to save as many lives as we can, we need to cooperate and address the real problems that we are facing now. The threat posed by nuclear weapons and climate change that could both lead us to climate crisis affecting so many people on Earth. Hope that during the conference, the representatives of different countries will work for a more cooperative and inclusive world for humanity, and what is more important, achieve their goals. The future of our children is in our hands now, and the results that we are going to get are the basement of their happiness. Thank you.
Thank you. I realized I got so distracted by the tech problems that I did not properly introduce Dr. Mironova. So I want to just quickly give some remarks for who she is. Dr. Olga Mironova is working as an associate professor at the chair of internal diseases at Sessionov University since 2018. She has been working as a cardiologist in the acute care department in Russian cardiology research and production complex founded by her grandfather, Eugene Chazov, for many years. Dr. Mironova is teaching students from Russia and all over the world, both in Russian and in English. So the importance of bringing up to light the problems of nuclear threat, equality, tolerance, and climate change is evident not only to her, but to her students, residents, and trainees as well. So I want to thank Dr. Olga for joining us virtually. We were really, really glad to have her here today. She's been a key leader of our movement since she joined our board last year, and we're incredibly lucky to continue the dialogue at a time when it's increasingly difficult to do so. So before we go to our Q&A segment, I'm very honored to pass the floor to Veronique Christori of the International Red Crescent and Red Cross. Veronique is the Senior Arms Control Advisor to the ICRC based here in New York City. Vero, I will slightly move this to you and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all. I'm truly delighted to be with you for this event, and thank you IPPNW for the invitation. As many mentioned, 70 years ago, doctors like you, the nurses, the Japanese Red Cross, and the IC witnessed firsthand the horror of suffering brought upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki when the atomic bombs were unleashed. They tried in near impossible conditions to assist the dying and injured. Hospitals were in ruins. There were no medicine, no bandage, no blood transfusion. In the awful hygienic conditions resulting from the heat and the lack of drinking water, wounds became infected and disease began to spread. As Dr. Junot accounted, of 1,000 patients who had taken refuge to the Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital on the first day, 600 rapidly died. As already mentioned by Molly, 80% of doctors and 90% of the nurses were killed in Nagasaki. Dr. Junot wrote, the physical impact of the bomb was beyond belief, beyond all apprehension, beyond imagination. Its moral impact was appalling. 7 decades on, we bear witness to the long-term effect of nuclear weapons, as the Japanese Red Cross hospitals, among others, continue to treat the many thousand victims of cancer caused by radiation exposure. Survivors of the atomic bombing are with us at the NPT WEFCON. We must pay tribute to them. Their presence and testimonies are of utmost importance. Today, there is no international plan, no capacity to respond adequately to the consequence of a nuclear confrontation, which could lead, as others said, to the death of millions of people, climate change, and global famine. What we cannot respond to, we must prevent. This is the message delivered last week by the ICRC president to the state party to the 10th NPT Review Conference. Since 1945, the International Red Cross and Red Cross movement has been calling for the prohibition and elimination of nuclear weapons. 5 decades ago, states concluded the NPT to prevent the devastation that will be visited upon all humankind by a nuclear war. This review conference is an opportunity that comes at a critical moment and should not be missed. Progress on nuclear disarmament is urgently needed if the treaty is to maintain its credibility. The risk that they may be used again by accident, miscalculation, or design is unacceptable, as already mentioned by many others. At a time when, again, the backdrop of the conflict in Ukraine, rhetoric around nuclear weapons is growing alarmingly, and nuclear deterrence theory seems to be regaining vigor, it's critical to refocus the debate on what the nuclear weapon use will mean for civilian and combatant, and for the natural environment on which we all depend. Why is it so important to focus on the consequence of nuclear weapons? Because they are the benchmark against which the moral, ethical, and legal acceptability of a weapon is to be judged, and deterrence theory are to be evaluated. As ICRC President Gellerberger put it bluntly, The existence of nuclear weapons poses some of the most profound questions about the point at which the right of states must yield to the interest of humanity and the extent of human suffering we are willing to inflict or to permit in war. Accepting nuclear weapons as an indispensable instrument of security is an indefensible and dangerous logic. Most states today see nuclear weapons as a major source of insecurity for their population and for future generations. There are several pathways to nuclear disarmament, but prohibition is an essential step. In this respect, the TPNW complements the NPT and supports its objective. It is an effective measure in implementation of Article 6. It paves the way for future measures to govern the complex process of nuclear disarmament. Through prohibition, it creates a disincentive for proliferation, and that is an important argument. NPT states must take urgent progress on implementing their obligation and commitment. The ICRC has submitted for the first time a working paper with recommendations on how this review conference can contribute tangibly to nuclear disarmament. These include, in particular, risk reduction measures, renewed commitment to the total elimination of nuclear weapons, cooperation with the TPNW regime, and disarmament education. NPT states should explore complementarity with the TPNW and take the opportunity it offers, notably toward nuclear weapon victim assistance and natural environment damage remediation. Let's work together for today and for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronique. We're so glad to have you here, and the ICRC voice is so central to the work that we do at IPNW. Let me bring Ella and Joe to the screen, and Spotlight and Joe. Great. Now we have ample time actually for question and answer, which is great. It's what we always want and need. So if you have any questions on the online room, I'll quickly look at the chat, and I see more comments than questions. So if you have any questions, either raise your hand in the Zoom room or put it in the chat. And if you're here in the room and would like to ask a question, I ask maybe for you to come over here so that people can see and hear you well, and we can keep this open line of communication very, very clear. So if you have any questions in the room, if you want to raise your hand and maybe come up. You don't need to be shy. Jasmine. No, let's see. And if you want to introduce yourself too, it'd be great.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I'm the Associate Director of the Nuclear Weapons Abolition Program at Physicians for Social Responsibility. And I wanted to ask for all of the doctors, you know, everything that we've heard today has been so important and so critical, especially hearing, you know, doctor after doctor say that no country can adequately, you know, respond to a nuclear attack. And I'm just curious what you think are some ways that we can help further amplify the health voices in these conversations, with the understanding that, you know, we have the scientific backing to prove why we need to disarm, why we cannot have these weapons exist for the fear of an attack happening, whether accidental or intentional, due to the consequences of that on our public health infrastructure. But yeah, I was just curious if there are ways that we as the non-pro and disarmament community can help further amplify health voices. Thank you.
Great. Joe or Olga, would you like to answer that question? Or Veronique?
I can start with the beginning of an answer, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, that's really hard to get a simple answer to this, actually. And this is the main work that we're trying to do. And I think that to get to people, we have two ways: either convince or use sentiments to get the people to get interested in that. And sadly, we have seen that arguments and convincing is not working, or at least we're trying to give some numbers and some explanation, scientists saying that we have no zero risk of a nuclear bomb exploding. But the main job for us and for everyone who is slightly interested is just to start the conversation and listen to what they have to say and show them that, yeah, we all have families, we have friends, and this could happen to anyone. As Joe mentioned, the nuclear bombs have no nationality, no sex, no religion. It would affect all. So yeah, that would be the first step, I guess.
Yeah,
Thank you. Go ahead, Joe, please.
I'd be happy to comment on this a little bit. I mean, I think, you know, in terms of the kind of medical diplomacy framework, you know, one of the things I think about is the different audiences that we communicate to, right? We communicate with our medical colleagues within our own country, we communicate with medical colleagues in other countries, and we're also trying to communicate to the general public and the government in our own countries. And each of these audiences requires a different frame and has kind of different challenges in meeting them. I think, you know, I personally have found it surprisingly easy to get traction in the medical community in my own country. You know, I work in general internal medicine, which is, especially in Boston, a space where a large number of people are other than clinical care, using their careers for advocacy and activism on some issue. You know, there are a lot of primary care doctors and hospitalists who work on global health, who work on climate change, gun violence policy. And so when I say I'm a hospitalist and the non-clinical thing I work on is nuclear weapons, you know, the response generally is, oh, that's interesting. I don't know much about that. Why don't you tell us? And there have been many opportunities within the setting of my hospital, our hospital system, my group of hospitalists to do educating, speak on these topics, speak to large audiences, different departments, get medical students involved. I think that there's a lot of potential for traction there. Similarly, you know, having this network and communicating with our colleagues in other countries is something that is, you know, I think it's amazing that this network exists. There's a lot of opportunity there, and I think, you know, a lot of opportunity to continue building. I do think, as Jasmine is alluding to, you know, reaching our governments and reaching our general publics present some really special challenges in this day and age. Our representatives often kind of defer on this issue, saying, oh, well, you know, until we hear about this from our constituents, we're not going to view this as a big problem. And so all of our, you know, factual arguments and storytelling kind of seems to fall on deaf ears unless we're able to bring in, you know, larger numbers of fellow citizens. In terms of reaching the general public, that is really, really difficult in this day and age. You know, I think the past, you know, 5 to 10 years in the United States has shown just the depth of misinformation, people living in you know, parallel dimension media landscapes, and you know, when we don't even have shared facts or, you know, trust of institutions or scientists or doctors, it's a little, it sort of challenges the premise of IPPNW, that as representatives of a kind of trusted community, we can bring this message to the public. So I think that that's definitely a challenge that we have to continue to be creative about.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Ella. I think something that's really central to what both of you said is keeping the people-centered approach, the human-centered approach, the stories, the medical background, which Joe, as you said, is currently being questioned in a lot of spaces groups of people not trusting science or medicine. And I think we need to push against that in all of our spaces and encourage people to trust this doctor's voice. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I just wanted to add that it's true that raising awareness and education, it's really key, because I mean, a lot of people even don't know that there's still a nuclear weapon, which is quite unbelievable, but it's a fact. And I would like to add the ICRC did before COVID a huge survey with 16,000 people around the world, half in armed conflict and half in a non-armed conflict. And what was striking, and it was for millennials, and it's called Millennials at War. And it was striking, it's half of them said that they think that they will witness a nuclear war during their lifetime, and that it was quite impressive. So I think that yeah, we need to build on that, to engage and to go in high school, universities, and talk about this issue and have a serious conversation on the impact of the weapon. Because as the ICRC, as I mentioned, it can be a political debate and so on, but for the ICRC, what is very important is we need to focus on the humanitarian consequence of the weapon as such. And as I said, what we are, as a human being, we are ready to inflict during war, the level of suffering. And then we know that that nuclear weapon will not be able, state will not be able to use them and respect international humanitarian law. And all states are party to the Geneva Convention and respect and should ensure respect of IHL, and that is a key. It's a key issue, and it's a key element. Yeah. So, and then we need to go beyond the discussion on nuclear deterrence, because if nuclear deterrence fails and there is a use of nuclear weapon, we need to think about Plan B and what would be the impact of this weapon, and not stay only in terrorism, and look on the reality that we will all encounter. So I think that it's a very important discussion that we need to continue to have with all states.
Yeah, thank you, Veronique. I think something that you also brought up in your presentation is the need for disarmament education. And that's something that we've talked about a lot at IPNW too. As Ella said, she's the immediate past European student representative of IPNW. Joe's been around for quite a bit of time since he was he still is a young doctor, but a younger doctor, and works closely with the Harvard medical students and educating them. And that's a role that I play in IPNW as well, as trying to reach medical students, young doctors, and kind of grow this new generation of doctors to know about the humanitarian impacts, to know that deterrence is not something that we can rely on, and then to go to the next steps and the action plans that we need to do, part of which is here at the NPT, the TPNW meeting that we had earlier this month in Vienna, and then how to push abolition forward from there. Ella and Joe, I wonder if there's something that you might want to touch on about disarmament education or reaching medical students or young doctors. I also see that Michael Orgel put a comment in the chat about reaching climate activists and maybe using this disarmament education to reach people from other movements like the climate movement, like global health, or other movements for justice.
And I would also wanted to mention that it's very, I've been doing nuclear disarmament and other arms control issue from the Arms Trade Treaty. I participated also in the elaboration of the Convention on Cluster Munition. And what is very important is to have young people, and it's very important that there are youth delegation at the NPT, because they will be the one to continue the hard work toward nuclear disarmament and the elimination of nuclear weapons. And I think that it's really key, and I see many young people around in the room. And I think that it's very important that you continue to work and raise awareness on this issue. So thank you very much for being there.
Joe and Ella, anything you wanted to add? Or I think I might have seen Vendela has her hand up. Vendela, would you like to go ahead?
Just briefly on reaching out to the public, we have found that the way to do that is to use NukeMap and do like a local version of There's No Place to Hide. And through that, we managed to get articles published in about half a dozen papers, and also like the national radio media picked up on this, because in a way it's sweet that people have forgotten what nuclear weapons actually do. So we have sort of made it very clear that there is nothing that we as doctors can do, and just blast use NukeMap and to explain this would happen in this town, in this city. And through this, we've managed to raise awareness and also get into the media. So that is one way. And also, of course, the NATO discussion in Sweden and the war in Ukraine has made this, there's a big interest in the public. And as I told you in another meeting, we've had over 200,000 visitors to our education site. Over 200,000 unique visitors have gone into our site to find more information about nuclear weapons. So it is a way.
Thank you, Vendela. And just so everybody knows, Vendela is the chair of IPPNW Sweden and a longtime IPPNW leader and doctor. I think you touched on something really important, Vendela, of both having this international dialogue and centering us in the international sphere, but also bringing it down to a local level to a point where people understand what we're talking about, the importance of what we're talking about, so it doesn't feel like it's out of our control or over our heads, where sometimes the nuclear debate can feel a little bit out of touch to people who aren't familiar with it. I think the other thing that you brought up is that you've had so much engagement on your website. Unfortunately, that's because of recent events in Eastern Europe. But I think that's something that we need to do as people in this room, as people in the online room, part of the IPPNW, ICAN broader disarmament abolition movement, is to take hold of this movement and to not let it pass, but to learn from it and really take action going forward so that we reach abolition, so that we don't reach another moment like this again. So thank you for bringing that up, Vendela. Let's see, are there any other questions in the chat? Let's see. Yeah, the climate one, and then we have one, we can take two at a time, from John Brewer that says, for the panelists, what got you personally interested in nuclear dangers in the midst of so many existential threats? I'm guessing for Olga, it was her grandfather, who for me was a great hero. And just so everybody knows, Olga's grandfather was one of the co-founders of IPPNW. He was the leader of our former Soviet affiliate. Does anybody want to touch on what got you personally interested in this movement in the midst of, like Joe said, pandemics, climate crises, and other pressing issues?
I'd actually like to go back and answer some of the questions about messaging and communicating with the public. I think there are a few points I want to make there. One of which is, a lot of people, if you've seen the polling data, a lot of people agree with us on the issues of nuclear weapons, really across the world, and to the extent to which they understand nuclear weapons, sort of have the basics down. I think the issue that we deal with is really kind of mechanisms of ego defense, where people are compartmentalizing this information and trying to not think about it because it's so depressing and overwhelming, and has the folks have the sense that there's nothing they can do about it. So I think it's important to, as Dr. Mironova did, share some of the history and sort of contradict this misperception that this is a distant issue that you can't do anything about, and in fact that grassroots movements have changed the course of the history of nuclear weapons. Both, 1960s, partial ban treaty was passed because of doctor activism and citizen activism. In the 1980s, the nuclear freeze movement changed the course of the Cold War, and that was a grassroots movement led by doctors. So I think sharing that and helping people understand that the work that they do actually makes a difference is crucial, and not overwhelming people with despair. I think another important piece here is that of adjusting our message to the audience. So for the general public, the simple syllogism of it is possible that these weapons could be used. If they did, it would be the end of the world. Most people, not everyone in the US, but most people agree that the end of the world would be a bad thing. And there is something you can do about it. So I think that's kind of a simple syllogism for the general public that I emphasize. But if you're speaking to climate activists or in general a progressive activist audience, the messaging is different, right? It is unethical to hold millions of people hostage with the threat of killing, millions of civilians and children, right? That's an unethical system of global security. And also, emphasizing the kind of intersectional harm done by these weapons, right? All the way from uranium mining and plutonium processing to waste disposal. These weapons disproportionately harm indigenous people, people on the margins of empire, people of color, women, causing infertility, birth defects. So I think that, and then similarly, I noticed, and this is kind of for Jasmine and our US PSR audience, the last National Defense Authorization Act had more Republicans voting against it than Democrats. A lot of the most far-right Republicans voted in line with PSR's priorities. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they don't like seeing $800 billion spent on weapons, but there's some message that presumably will resonate with those folks too, and we need to be finding common ground. I think the last thing that I want to say about this, and I know I can go on forever here, is and this is kind of a cliche, but we do need to get creative about how we reach the general public, because a lot of people now get their news from Instagram, from Snapchat, from Kylie Jenner's social media. I think thinking creatively about Hollywood movies and social media and celebrities. There's I don't have the answer to how to do that, but I think that's something. And I did see something along those lines. From the first meeting of state parties in Vienna. Someone in Austria, I can't remember her name, but was making YouTube videos where she interviewed people about nuclear weapons related topics, and it was in the kind of snappy, well-edited YouTuber format that was really impressive. So that's all I have to say.
Go ahead.
Mention that we can do something. I mean, the historic entry into force of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is the most amazing answer and the most historic achievement in the past 20 years on international humanitarian law. I mean, it's the impact of the treaty on the long term. I think that shouldn't be underestimated. It's a clear prohibition of the last category of weapon of mass destruction, and now nuclear weapons are illegal under international law for states party to the treaty. So I think that it's a very important and a very important instrument that you should push your government and your constituency, as if you're in politics, to join. And I think that is a very important treaty. So
yeah, absolutely. Ella, since you had so much experience reaching medical students throughout Europe, actually, I wonder if there's anything you want to add to messaging and how to reach people. It sounds like there's consensus that hope and the solutions need to be central to our conversations, but if you have anything specific you want to touch on, please do.
Yeah, of course I agree with Joe and Veronique on the importance to reach to younger generation via new social medias and TV is not even TV. Nobody watches TV anymore. But yeah, actually, the TV series Chernobyl had quite an impact on people who've seen it, and it's really interesting to see that they had no clue of what would happen or what happened actually when there was the big accident. So yeah, I definitely agree on reaching young people via social medias, and we've been trying using humor, creating GIFs or videos, or a lot of things. And of course we need to get creative, and I don't know, we try rewriting songs. It actually did work quite well. And but yeah, just to come back to the question of Jasmine and Michael, when we're talking, if we take the example of climate activists, of course we need to emphasize on the climate problem, the winter, the nuclear winter, the disposal. I'm sorry, my brain is very confused between Swedish and English now, so I'm trying to think. But yeah, we need to adapt our talk to who we're talking to. If we're talking to politics, well, okay, this is the money you spent, and this is the money that we could use for education, care, whatever else. So yeah, we really need to find the point that interests the person that you have in front of you. If you have a family, just say, yeah, you want your children to live in a free nuclear weapon world. If you're talking to a grandma or a grandfather, you're gonna say to them that you want their grandchildren to live also in the nuclear free weapon world. As I said, I think that argument should have worked, but unfortunately now we have to use sentiments and the public opinion to change in order to get more and more awareness on nuclear weapons. As for reaching medical students, I don't know how is the situation in every country now, but in France it's actually really hard to get even some interest from medical students, especially that in France, where I think somebody mentioned that it was Arthur who said that many people think that we need nukes for security, and this is a big problem in France. I think it was the last study showed that 60% of people are convinced that we need the nuclear weapons to be safe, and this is what we need to change. This is what we need to work on.
I wanted to just perhaps to mention that on the ICRC website there are a lot of videos that you can watch, and a lot of material, and one of them is what if we nuke a city, and it was the most watched video in the history of the ICRC. So I think that there is some level of awareness and scare and fear about nuclear weapon. So I encourage them to watch it.
Yeah.
What if we bomb a city? What if we nuke a city?
There have been a number in the first few weeks, in the end of February, beginning of March, a lot of the kind of top videos on YouTube or things along those lines. There are also a series from this German group Kurzgesagt, which explores a lot of those questions and have been massively popular on YouTube.
Yeah, I think just as important as it is to share hope and the next steps, we also need to be honest about what the threat is, so people feel that urgency to act and also to not spread misinformation. I'm sure some people in this room might have seen the recent video that the emergency management, emergency management office of New York City released of what a nuclear weapon would do in New York City, and it was and how to respond. And we've all just heard multiple times over that there can be no adequate response to any use of nuclear weapons. So I think spreading correct information and then spreading the solution also. We have a question from the room.
I wanted to comment on also had some recommendations. Hello, everyone. Rebecca Irby from Peak Institute and New Detroit. Thank you all for this amazing conversation. Just a few recommendations on the question of how to reach people. And I think one of the ways that we've been so successful is focusing on groups that are not necessarily interested in nuclear weapons yet. And I will say that Jasmine over here and I are working on a really incredible project that was recently funded by Plowshares. Thank you everyone for Plowshares. But it's called Edges or Voices from the Edges of Society. And it's looking at and taking this idea of really bringing and helping communities understand how this is all interconnected, interrelated, and intersectional. And another thought on that, I'm actually working with so many young doctors right now. I am in resident programs all over the state of Michigan talking about anti-racism work. And the way that we got that done was through policy. So I think that this is something that could also be really implemented into resident work and through the guise of anti-racism, because that's really, at least in the United States and in the medical field, because of COVID and because of the disparities that we saw with communities of color, this idea of anti-bias training has become so critically important in the medical field. In the state of Michigan, it is now a requirement in order to get your license. So looking at that and looking at programs such as that, I would recommend that we start to think about how we infuse disarmament education into resident programs. And we have a number of models that I'd be happy to share on.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I know that Joe has done a few continuing ed programs with what is it, mass education?
Yeah,
Joe.
we had an accredited continuing medical education module that we offered to the Massachusetts Medical Society, and we had a big audience for that. I think it was like somewhere between 100 and 200 folks. Also important to note that nuclear disarmament was part of medical school curricula in the 1980s. And it is no longer, and so that's something that we can talk about, and obviously there's a lot of competition for space on the medical education curriculum, required curriculum. But
yeah, no, that's great. And I think having that intersectional lens, as Rebecca mentioned, is so incredibly important. Just saw a message in the chat from Sarah Kuiter, who's actually took Ella's position when Ella moved on to her residency as IPNW's European student representative, who said that intersectionality was what brought her to the Vienna meeting of states parties to the TPNW, and what's kept her involved, which is incredible. I'm really glad to see that. Any other questions or comments from the room? Patrick? Yeah, do you want to come up here and ask a question?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick. I'm from Germany. I'm from the Peace Workshop Mutlangen. So that's basically where the nuclear weapons were stationed in Germany in the 1980s. I just wanted to shift the question a little bit, or the topic. We were always talking about nuclear weapons, which is a great risk, and we all know this. But I think the number of, or the amount of nuclear fissile material is rising at the moment. Less than 40% is under IAEA safeguards at the moment, which is for me a very high risk. So we have enough fissile materials to produce more than 100,000 new nuclear weapons. We don't know exactly where it is, which countries, or how much the countries have it. We have a estimation which countries have it. So my question is, how big of a threat is it to you, and how can we address this the best way in the public?
Who wants to take that tricky question? Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
I can just briefly say thank you, Patrick. It's not an issue I know a whole lot about. I know that securing of fissile nuclear material was, in the early Obama administration, a sort of a consensus thing that folks could work on. So the Obama administration did a lot of work on, finding loose fissile material in Mexico and securing it and things like that. So it's something that has a lot more, there's more political flexibility on, because everyone agrees that it's bad in principle. But I'm not sure if how the extent to which I can further answer that question.
Veronique, is there anything you wanted to add to that? Yeah, I think it's a conversation we need to continue to have. Important to raise. I'm noting that we are about 10 minutes to the end of our conversation. I wonder if we want to go around and give some few final remarks and thoughts to this conversation and the great discussion that we've had following your initial remarks. So why don't we go in the reverse order? Veronique, if you want to kick us off and maybe give some final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, and then to say that the ICRC is very keen to engage with you all and to work together to lend our expertise on international humanitarian law, on nuclear weapon, but on all weapon issue. We are dealing a lot of issue, and including new technology. And so I think that it's important that to continue to raise awareness, to have more research and data on the impact of on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. Students, it will be great when they are doing their thesis and so on, that to research on the impact of on nuclear weapon and nuclear testing on health, also on the environment and so on. So there is a huge field, and that people can make a difference by doing research and putting their expertise and their to the betterment of humanity. And I think that it's very important to be engaged and to keep the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then we will pass it to Joe. You want to go ahead, Joe?
I've talked a lot, so I'll try to be quick here. Always super wonderful to see all these colleagues. Somebody who I know this is a grim topic and there's a lot of work to do, but as somebody who loves travel and learning about other cultures and languages, one of the things that I just love about this is seeing people all over the world and working together. And the Zoom era has really supercharged that. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. All of the kind of allies out there, Molly can give you my contact information. And those who are in New York in person, please do carry our message to the diplomats. I don't know how many of them are in the room there, but they need to hear this too.
Thank you, Joe. Ella, with a beautiful sunset, it looks like.
Yeah, I do have a beautiful sunset. Thanks, Molly, first for organizing this Zoom and our talk. It was really an honor to be here. It's always amazing to see that we can have so many people from other countries, but share the same hope that one day we can say that we made it and that we do not have any more nuclear weapons in the world. So I hope that one day we can say that. Otherwise I hope to see all of you one day, maybe at the next conference or in another country or city. And you always can reach out to me also. I can leave my email. And I've received a lot of message from students. You can always contact me, Molly, or everyone and our student representative to get in touch and share the work. And we're really glad that we have more and more person interested in our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ella. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Veronique, and to Leslie and Olga who joined us online. I think this has been an incredibly wonderful conversation. One thing that I love about IPPNW is our unique way to reach across borders, to reach across ideologies, and to center the humanitarian health consequences of the world's most indiscriminate weapons. It's very rare that you get a room again with members of the P5 that agree on something, and we're able to do that. Again, we sadly missed our Chinese colleagues today, but we're very much in touch with them and look forward to continuing this conversation with them. One thing that I just want to round out as we finish up this conversation is that a few months ago, at the start of the crisis in Ukraine, IPPNW initiated a petition with a vase that has over a million signatures now, calling on both parties to have an immediate ceasefire and to not use, for NATO and Russia, to not use nuclear weapons in the Ukraine conflict. And that's something that we're continuing to call on in this NPT review conference. We're calling on the P5 and all of NATO to make a very, very concrete call that they will not use nuclear weapons during this ongoing conflict in Ukraine. We hope that the P5 will heed our call, and the millions that joined us and the 17 Nobel laureates that endorsed the message. So far, they have not said anything to our call after repeated messages, trying to talk to them over and over again about it. And I hope that you can all bring this message to them as well. We're also calling on the P5 to leave this conference with a concrete steps to adhere to their Article 6 obligations to disarm. We hope that can be done through the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which is the first legal instrument to ban and hopefully eliminate nuclear weapons. So thank you all for being here today. We have a very, very big task ahead of us. But again, I feel amazing having these colleagues here from all around the world, and the IPPNW family and the ICANN family, and all of you who are part of this as well. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.